Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Devotions. We are in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6. Hope that you've enjoyed this gospel so far. So let's get rolling. And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first that he is Jesus, went through the cornfields, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. And certain of the Pharisees said to them, Why do you that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath days? And Jesus answered and said, Have you not read so much as this, what David did when himself was hungry and they that were with him? And he went to the house of God and did take and eat showbread and gave also to them that were with him, which is not lawful to eat for the priest alone. And he said to them, That the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. And it came to pass also the another Sabbath day that he entered into the synagogue and taught, and there was a man with a right hand that was withered. And the scribes and the Pharisees watched him whether he would heal on the Sabbath day, and they might find accusation against him. But he knew their thoughts, and said to the man which had the withered hand, Arise up, stand forth in the midst. And he arose and stood forth. Then said Jesus unto them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath day to do good or do evil? Save a life or destroy it? And looking around about upon them, and said to the man, Stretch forth thy hand. And he did so, and his right hand was restored, whole as the other. And they were filled with madness, and communed one with another what they may do with Jesus. So Jesus and the Pharisees didn't see the eye on very many things. They were opponents. And on one Sabbath day, they pressed Jesus on an accusation that he was a Sabbath breaker, which was against one of the Ten Commandments. They soon observed an incident that gave them basis to openly accuse Jesus. Jesus and his disciples were passing through a cornfield on the Sabbath. Because the disciples were hungry, they took the corn and they ate it. This was in keeping with the law, which allowed for a hungry man to pick grain along a pathway to satisfy his hunger. They accused Jesus of breaking the Sabbath. Jesus offered an explanation as to why they were not guilty of this violation. Their proof was based on the ignorance of their own scripture. Jesus referred them to a time when David and the members of his party were hungry. David entered to the house of God, ate bread, which according to Levitical law was only supposed to be for the priest. In other words, if you're hungry, God don't mind. Then he drops a truth that would infuriate them whenever he said, Oh, yeah, by the way, I am the Lord. I am the boss of the harvest or the Sabbath. I'm the I'm the Lord of the harvest. I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. I'm the Lord of it all. I made it for me. It's mine. Basically, I can do what I want. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. Then on another Sabbath day, Jesus was in the synagogue. He encountered a man with a shriveled hand, intent on finding basis to accuse Jesus. Matthew actually tells that um, they challenged him. They said, Is it right to heal on the Sabbath? There was widespread controversy as to what medication was allowed on the Sabbath in Jesus' day. Should we allow medication? Should we not allow medication? What is allowed? What is it? What's permissible? What isn't? Jesus answered their question by referring to their own practices. He said in Matthew and Mark, if the life of one of your animals were in jeopardy, would you preserve it? Is it right to do good on the Sabbath? Is it wrong to do bad on the Sabbath? And since it was not contrary to the law or even to their practices, Jesus looks at the man and he commands him, Stretch forth your hand, and the man was healed. Doesn't really matter the day of the week. The Pharisees responded in several ways. First, they were furious with Jesus. They were infuriated because Jesus was publicly humiliating them. Secondly, they wanted to plan his death. They wanted to kill him. And then thirdly, they entered into an alliance with the Herodians, who were their enemies, and they solicited their support in an attempt to kill Jesus. They were determined that he must die. See, this Sabbath controversy actually marked a very important element. The opposition of the Pharisees was no longer veiled, but it's opened, and they were determined to put him to death and were soliciting help from others to accomplish this goal. This was the last straw for them. Came to pass that he went to a mountain to pray. He continued all night in prayer to God. And when it was day, he called unto his disciples and to the chosen 12, who also named his apostles, Simon, whose name was Peter, and Andrew, his brother, James and John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Simon called Zealots, and Judas the brother of James, and Judas Iscariot, who is also a traitor. And he came down with them and stood in the plain, and the company of his disciples, and a great multitude of people out of Judea and Jerusalem, and from the sea of the coast of Tyre and Sidon, which came to hear him, and to be healed of their diseases. And they were vexed with unclean spirits, and they were healed. And the whole multitude sought to touch him, for there went out virtue of him, and he healed them all. So in 3 years, Jesus assembles this team of 12. The disciples of Jesus progress from what Acts 4 calls unlearned and ignorant men to bold spiritual leaders in what is now the largest organization in the world. How could this transformation happen? It happened because Jesus spent the majority of his time with them. He invested his time, his energy with 12, not 1,200. Jesus practiced the principle, the more time with less equals greater impact. Jesus gave them handles, meaning that he simplified truth into something they could grasp, practice, and pass along to someone else. He gave them training ground. He didn't just lecture them, he provided them an environment for them to do hands-on work. And then he gave them wings. He empowered them to go beyond even what he had done, for he told them that greater works than these will you do. So he led them by example, but then he empowered them to lead themselves. And he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, Blessed are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you that hunger, for you will be filled. Blessed are you that weep, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when men shall hate you, when they shall separate you from their company, shall reproach you, cast out your name as evil for the Son of Man's sake. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. For in like manner did their fathers unto the prophets. But woe to you that are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you that are full, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you that laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men shall speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets. So the first thing Jesus did was transform their perspective. This Beatitudes is actually a perspective change. He talked about the blessings of being poor, hungry, hated, insulted, and persecuted. You want to talk about a change of attitude. See, effective leadership always begins with an attitude and perspective change. Changing individuals from the inside out, change their perspective, change the way they see the world, change the way that they view things, give them a new world view on how they should live. Whenever you have a biblical worldview, whenever you look at things through the lens of Jesus, it totally changes the way that you see things. It changes the way that you live. It changes the way that you respond to things. And that's what he's doing here. He's giving them a perspective change. But I say to you which hear, love your enemies. This one is a massive perspective change. Love your enemies, do good to those that hate you, bless those that curse you, pray for those that despitefully use you. And unto you that smite thee on one cheek, offer him the other. And to him that takes away your cloak, forbid not him to take your coat also. Give to every man that asks thee, and to him that taketh away the goods, ask them not again. And as ye would that men should do to you, do to them likewise. For if you love that love you, what thank have you? For sinners also love those that love them. And if you do good to those that do good to you, what good is it to you? For sinners also do that. And if you lend to them of whom you hope to receive, what's it good to you? For sinners also lend to sinners, which receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, hoping for nothing again. Your reward shall be great, and you shall be the children of the highest, for he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father is also merciful. Judge not, and you won't be judged. Condemn, and you won't be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it shall be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure you give, that will be measured to you again. He spake a parable unto them. Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they both fall into the ditch? The disciple is not above his master, but everyone that is perfect shall be as his master. And why beholdest thou the mote in thy brother's eye, perceivest not the beam that's in your own eye? Either how canst thou say to thy brother, Brother, let me pull the mote that is in thine eye, when thou thyself beholdest not the beam that's in thine own? Thou hypocrite, cast first out the beam that's in your own eye, and you will clearly be able to see the mote that's in your brother's eye. Now, mote and beam, what does all that mean? Let's look at that. In telling his disciples to judge not, he was not forbidding them to distinguish between good and evil. He was not forbidding them to discern between truth and error in doctrine. He was not primarily dealing with actions, but rather motives behind actions. And in order to illustrate the fallacy of judging another's motives, Jesus uses the illustration of a speck of sawdust and like a beam. A speck of sawdust and a beam are made from the same material, just different sizes. Have you ever noticed how people judge the hardest against things that they themselves struggle with? God seemed to say, deal with your own problems first and then help someone else. For a good tree bringeth forth not corrupt fruit, neither doth a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. For every tree that is known by its own fruit, for the thorns men do not gather figs, nor a branded bush gather grapes. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings what's good. An evil man brings an evil treasure of his heart, bringeth forth evil. For the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. Remember, in real time, Jesus talking about Pharisees. Apparently, what was on the inside is not what showing was on the outside. A tree is not deemed good or evil by what kind of tree it is, but what kind of fruit that it carries. If you want good fruit on the outside of your life, have things right on the inside of your life. And why call me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? Whosoever cometh to me and heareth the sayings and doeth them, I will show you to whom he is like. He's like a man that built a house. He diggeth deep and laid the foundation on a rock. And when the flood arose, the steam beat vehemently upon the house and could not shake it, for it was founded on the rock. But he that heareth and doeth not is like a man that without a foundation built a house upon the earth. Against the steam did beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of the house was great. Sand, teachings of the Pharisees, sand is nothing more than small pieces of rock that's detached from the whole. Rock, the teachings of Jesus, is the truth and the way. It rains on both houses. The question is not the rain or the storms of your life. The question is, what kind of foundation are you built on? In Matthew's gospel, Jesus did not call the builders good or bad. He called them wise and foolish. So here's a question. Where's the foundation of your life? Where's the foundation of your family? And are you wise or are you foolish? That's a question that only you can answer. Hope that you enjoyed this lesson today. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.